College football magazine season.
It's Christmas
believe it or
for
not.
me.
That's right. We love it. And the Athlon magazine is available, previewing the college football season. A college football season is probably going to be like none other we have seen. So for more on that, we bring in Braden Gall from Athlon Sports here on the Williams Tractor Hotline. Hi, Braden. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Good to talk to you.
So we'll start with Arkansas. We've seen some of the previews already. That Athlon, again, has forecasted Arkansas to not win an SEC game for the third straight season.
Was that a question?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
no.
It wasn't a very good question. I'll give you that.
No. Listen, 3-9, 0-8 is the projection, and again, I'm not going to sit here and say that was my idea or I agree or disagree. I agree with where Arkansas is picked in the West, and that was at 7. So, do they find a way to get a W somewhere along the road? It's certainly possible. Having a non-conference game like Notre Dame certainly doesn't help. Listen, I think it's unfortunate, and this is just how I view it. It's unfortunate that I don't think you're ever going to really know from scheme to scheme to scheme if any program can go and swing that dramatically in that short a period of time and expect to have success. Even some of the premier national championship caliber programs that are winning, the Ohio States of the world don't do that. So I just don't. That's just a tough ask. That's a really hard ask to go from a Brett Bielema style into a Chad Morris sort of intellectual, sort of analytical style of pass happy offense to back to what we're not sure, what exactly Sam Pittman's going to bring. I think Kendall Brow certainly fits into a little bit more of the Chad Morris bucket than he would certainly Brett Bielema. But I just think what is the identity going to be like under an offensive line coach? And there's not a lot of precedent in the sport right now. I mean, Matt Luke at Ole Miss, okay. There's not a lot of precedent for offensive line coaches going to become head coaches. And so we don't really know what the influence on the offense is going to look like. But if it's going to be like an offensive lineman and true to his roots, then I think you're looking at time to develop a roster that, the recruiting wasn't necessarily the problem. They had some nice, talented young players under Chad Morris. So I think 10,000-foot view from our perspective is, okay, you're starting back from zero again, and you're re-implementing another switch, another shift, and you're not sure how quickly that could take place. So I think that it's more about unknowns than it is anything else at that, especially on that side of the ball. Talent just needs to be built up on the defensive side of the ball, regardless of scheme that you're playing.
I'm curious of what the national perception is of the Sam Pittman hire when you look at Eli Drinkwitz going to Missouri, Leach down at Mississippi State, Kiffin at Ole Miss, and then Sam Pittman, a first-time head coach coming to Arkansas, a place he'd been before. But, here inside the state, I mean, we've all sort of grown to love the guy. I mean, he says everything correctly. But what's the perception outside the borders of the state of Arkansas?
That it didn't go down the way it was planned. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean it's not going to be successful, though. I mean, that's LSU fans didn't want Coach O, and don't let them tell you anything else other than that either. By the way, like the percentage of people that thought Coach O was the greatest hire and that they're going to win championship with Coach O and he's the guy to return us to prominence. The percentage of LSU fans, if I had to guess, that loved that hire, which is somewhat similar, right? A guy that has history there. He's a defensive line coach by trade. The big difference, of course, is head coaching experience. If you count 3-21 in the SEC at Ole Miss as experience, so there's some similarities there. And if you're hopeful about Sam Pittman, that's the model. You're talking about a guy who's been there, who knows the culture, who knows the people, who wants to create buy-in, and that's what Dabo Swinney did at Clemson as an interim wide receivers coach when he took over, and that's what Coach O was able to do at LSU. Even though most LSU fans will tell you they didn't like the move when it happened. And so there's a lot of revisionist history in sports, shockingly. And so like the way you look at it is I don't think this is how they planned on it going. And I'm not sure if you gave anybody that was in a position of power or some truth serum that what they would tell you. I think they'd have to admit that. I don't think Missouri went the way they expected it to go either, necessarily. I don't think that was the plan, right? I always believe in firing a coach because you have a plan in place. And that means either someone will say yes and you want to go get, or a short list of people will say yes. And so I don't think either Missouri or Arkansas did that. I think Ole Miss and Mississippi State, you could argue, did that. And so that's probably the separation, is that two programs felt like they had a guy that they targeted, that they wanted, and they went and got. and they executed on it, and the other two didn't necessarily. Now, again, I think very highly of Eli Drinkwitz. I think his offense after, you look at NC State under Dave Doran after he left and the offense has plummeted into sort of nothing. Can he run a program? Who knows? But he's a really good offensive mind and a really good coach. Sam Pittman's probably the best offensive line coach in the country. He's an excellent recruiter. Those are the things you would have said about Jeremy Pruitt when he took the Tennessee job, and a lot of people question that hire. So these things can go either way, and I think the perception of how it played out, again, you want to talk about complete circus of a sideshow when it talks about hiring a coach. That was Tennessee, and we still don't know. We still don't know if Jeremy Pruitt's going to be great. It looks like they're trending in the right direction. They still haven't beat anybody with a winning SEC record, but whatever. So they're Tennessee fans are excited. So you can stumble into really good coaches. It happens all the time because really smart people make bad decisions and smart decisions all the time on accident. So I think that's the perception nationally, and the perception of the head coach is very specifically he is arguably the best offensive line coach in the country, and he's going to be a great recruiter. That's almost the exact tagline I would have used for Coach O along the defensive line or Jeremy Pruitt in the secondary. And great recruiters and brilliant at what they do, what they coach. Do they have any idea how to be CEOs in the most cutthroat league in America? That remains to be seen.
We're talking with Braden Gall from Athlon here on Ruskin and Zach. You brought up something earlier that I hadn't really thought of, and that the perception we've had here is that, yes, Pittman is going to lean on his handpicked offensive line coach to shore up the offensive line, but Briles is going to have carte blanche with the offense, and it's going to be Briles' offense with a better offensive line. Is that possible, or do you think Pittman wants to put a more kind of ground and pound sort of imprint on Arkansas football? Because the most recent success they had was those years when they were doing that with Alex Collins and Jonathan Williams here.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. That question is fascinating. And I think Arkansas is a very unique program in that sense, that they've got a ton of money. You've got great fans. You've got not the greatest home recruiting base, but you're the only show in the state, and you can get to Texas pretty quickly. So there's a lot of natural inherent advantages to being at Arkansas that you don't have at, say, Kentucky even. And so I think that's why, and even under, Bobby P., they were able to run the football. Like, everybody, listen, he was brilliant at throwing the football. There's no question. But everybody assumes that Bobby Petrino, even back to the Louisville days with Michael Bush, he built his offenses on power running. Gus Malzahn runs a spread based on power rushing. So I still think there has to be an element of line of scrimmage play in the SEC. But how do you do that at a program like Arkansas, where there's clearly a lot to work with, but it's not as much as Alabama, LSU, A&M, and Auburn, and that's the problem. Missouri, Arkansas does a way better job than Missouri. South Carolina and Arkansas are very parallel in my mind when it comes to really great fan support, lots of money, decent recruiting base, and hasn't really been able to get over the hump in the modern era because they're in a division where there are just 3 or 4 other programs that have more of all of the same stuff. And that's just a really difficult. So do you have to, long story short here, do you have to zig, right, when everybody else is zagging? And I think that works for programs like West Virginia, maybe a Missouri. I think when you run those types you're going to go zone read. I don't know if Mike Leach's system in the SEC is going to work, because eventually at some point you have to play line of scrimmage football. You got to get stops. You got to pick up 3rd and short, 4th and goal. You got to be able to do that stuff in this league. It's not like the Pac-12. And even at Washington State, Chris Peterson and the Washington Huskies figured out a way to stop Washington State every single year. And that's because they had talent and they were really well coached defensively along the defensive line. So I think at some point you still have to, it's a line of scrimmage league. And so I think having Sam Pittman and his skills is a huge plus. But do you want to have it mixed in with the spread principles? Because you can't really do what Alabama does unless you've got equal level players. And how many teams in America have that? Clemson, LSU, Ohio State, maybe. Auburn and A&M don't have it. So I just think you can't do exactly what Alabama does to Alabama unless you've got equal talent. And so that's why I think it might be, I'm talking myself into a nice blend of spread with power, and you put those together and you go, okay, maybe you got something there.
We've been at this for about 9.5 minutes. We have not mentioned Felipe Franks. The quarterback position the last 2 years has been a disaster. it appears, at least on paper, that they have solved the problem for this year, possibly next year. What's your opinion of Felipe Franks coming into this system with Kendall Briles?
I think number one, Dan Mullen is a freaking genius at the position. There's no question about that. Number two, I think Felipe Franks was largely undervalued as a player during his full season as a starter, the second full season as a starter at Florida, and then even a little bit of last year before he got hurt. I think the skill and the talent, the athletic ability, the raw ability has always been there. I think he needed someone to develop him. I think Dan Mullen's scheme might be the best offensive scheme in America for quarterbacks. So I think that's partly why he flourished. But his numbers 2 years ago were really good. I mean, I want to say, I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say almost 30 touchdowns total with like 6 or 7 interceptions. I mean, really efficient football for a Florida program that I think had 4 wins the year before and a new coaching staff. So he's been through a lot, and he has a ton of experience. He's got a ton of athletic ability. He's made big plays against rivals in big games. Doesn't mean that he's good enough to beat Georgia and win the East and be a championship caliber quarterback. Probably not. But I think he went from punchline his first year to sort of a pretty efficient, pretty efficient game-winning quarterback the next year. And as long as he still has all of those skills, I think he's a heck of a player, especially in a league where there's no clear-cut answers at that position anywhere right now. Alabama, I'm not worried about. I think one of those two guys is going to be great. No idea if Miles Brennan is any good or not. I think Bo Nix is pretty good. But, is KJ Costello going to transfer in and be the best quarterback in the West? Like, that is the guy who ran for 1,000 yards for Ole Miss the best quarterback in the West? Like, we just don't know what that position is going to look like. And having a guy who started a boatload of games in the SEC puts you ahead of a lot of other people.
When we're talking with Braden Gall from Athlon here on Ruskin and Zach. When you're putting together a preseason magazine this year, it's unlike any other year, I would imagine, because some teams had a little spring practice, like Arkansas had no spring practice at all. So when you have spoken to people to try and get these write-ups together, how have coaches been able to evaluate really anything?
That we're all in the same boat, guessing here. But some of the preseason fun every year is guesswork because let's be honest. I mean, these little. So number one, what's different between our magazine and everybody else is that we go out and get beat writers, people that are on campus or around campus that cover the team, that go to practice, during the fall and in the spring and in the summer to write our stories because we want to give the best possible information to our reader. And not every magazine does that. We don't have to name them, but not every magazine does that. And we're proud of doing that. Having said that, even going to beat writers who are at spring practice every day, these little feudal dictators who run college football programs that are called head coaches, they don't actually give you any information anyway. So there is an element of, man, I wish we could have had a little more insight into the battle for the left tackle here or a little bit more insight into the quarterback battle there. And certainly you can gain some information, but largely these coaches don't let anything out, man. They don't. I mean, and especially in the SEC, it's not necessarily this way in the Pac-12, where everything's a little bit more laid back. Some of the smaller schools in the Big Ten and the ACC don't mind. But where football is as important as it is in the SEC or in Texas or wherever, it's not a lot of information comes out during spring ball anyway. So there's an element of guesswork no matter what. And there's an asterisk next to 2020 for every sport, whether it's the NBA, Major League Baseball, hockey, the Masters, the Derby, the Indy 500, college football. There's going to be an asterisk next to everything. And it counts. Everybody, everyone's going to give a championship away, hopefully. But it's a little different than any other year. And so there's a little bit more guesswork in already a sport that's the most volatile from year to year anyway. So to me, it just adds more excitement. It didn't make putting the magazine together any easier, and we're gonna get a lot of stuff wrong, but we do that every year anyway. So we get a lot of stuff right, we get a lot of stuff wrong, but we're giving you our best, most educated guess, and we did that with as much information as possible this year.
Magazine's out today. One of my favorite parts of your magazine are the anonymous coaches. How hard is it to get these coaches to talk about other programs in their conference? Because some of the quotes are brutally honest.
Not if you've ever met a coach and you're talking to him off the record, the answer is not hard at all. Coaches are like teenage sorority girls. They will blab and blab and blab and blab and blab if they know they're protected. And we have a really, really long track record of guaranteeing that sort of anonymity. I can't even say the word. And so I think, we're the oldest learning magazine of our kind, and I can't remember actually the year we started putting in the anonymous scouting reports. I'm with you. It is my favorite part of the magazine, and we have to trim it down. And so that's my favorite part of having this job since 2007 is I see all the stuff that hits the cutting room floor on the scouting reports. And I love, when we look at 15 bullet points about a team and we've got to cut it to 8 or 9 or 10 and we pick the best ones. And some of them we have to be really delicate about because if you read through the lines, you can kind of try to guess as to who it is, right?
Yep.
So every one of these is done from another coach or another staff member in the conference. So we've got every one of those reports in the SEC is a quote from another SEC head coach or coordinator, and it's the same thing in the ACC, same thing in the other leagues as well. And it is by far, I'm with you, it's by far my favorite part, and I think our track record of maintaining that wall is why we get those. And I'd like to think that, listen, I'm not a huge fan of the anonymous source thing when it comes to, breaking news all the time. I'd like to, we could have a really long debate about that. But I think when it comes to this kind of stuff, I've been around enough SEC coaches after a couple pops, and man, if they know it's off the record, they are not afraid to talk. they're just not. I had one, I'm not going to tell you the coach in the SEC. It's a current head coach in the SEC. Somebody told me this guy was a total cancer off the record. Because that guy's a total cancer off the record. And it's like, I can't tell you who said it or who it's about, but it's one of those things where you're just going, man, you would never have said that if in any other walk of life. If you were currently employed, if you were on television, you would never have said that. But you had a beer and you're off the record talking to a media guy, and all of a sudden you start blathering because maybe, who knows, maybe you don't like the guy. I don't know.
It's Saban, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. It was actually Saban talking about
Saban. About Saban, yeah.
As bulletin board material for himself.
How many of these radio interviews do you do where people try and guess, and you got to be like, look, I can't. Come on, we can't just guess right now. Come on.
It's a lot fewer than you think, actually.
Okay.
I think a lot of people, because it's such a great. I mean, you guys aren't the first ones that act like, hey, this is our favorite part. It's everybody's favorite part, and if we all go hey, we'll just let them do their thing and not bother them about it, we'll keep getting it every year. And so that's sort of how it's worked. And again, I'm with you guys. It's the day I walked into the office in 2007 and took the job. It was my favorite part of the magazine, and it's been that way ever since.
Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, and who's the fourth team in the playoff?
Oklahoma's our pick. It's not. I don't think they're the fourth best team in America.
Come on,
Zach is a Notre Dame fan. Braden, we should point out.
Tell somebody in the Big 12 to hire somebody to be the Oklahoma there. Just seriously, because I don't think they're the fourth best team. I don't. I would have them one spot ahead of Notre Dame at 8 in my power rankings. Just if I had to think about it off the top of my head. No, I think they're probably the 8. They're in a tier with. We've got Notre Dame at 9, Oregon at 10, A&M at 11. I think Oklahoma's more in that tier. If you had to tell me who's better, LSU, Florida, Georgia, Penn State, I think all 4 of those teams are better than Oklahoma. But you look at Oklahoma State, Texas, Iowa State, and there's a lot to like about all of them. There's a lot to not like about all of them. So it's just who's going to beat Oklahoma, and their margin for error is so much greater than everybody else because they can lose a game in the league and then come back and beat that team in their conference championship game. So, sure, they play Tennessee in the non-conference. Tennessee's improving, but I don't think they're good enough to go into Oklahoma and win that game. So they're probably going to be, 3-0 in the non-conference. Are there some stumbling blocks in there? Sure. But it's way easier for a 1-loss Oklahoma to get in than it's going to be for a 2-loss Pac-12 Oregon team champion or a second-place SEC team or even a second-place Penn State team because it's just the margin for error is that much smaller and certain things have to happen out of your control. Whereas Oklahoma can just rock and roll and they can just control it. So unfortunately it's Oklahoma, but I do think they're closer teams in the Big 12 to them than the last couple of years, namely because of the quarterback situation. But the top 3 are the 3 I would pick a title winner from.
Braden Gall, the Athlon Sports College Football magazines on newsstands today. Braden, we really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Athlonsports.com.
All right.
Buy us magazine, please.
All right. That's right. Thank you. Braden Gall, Athlon Sports, athlonsports.com. All our guests join us here on the Williams Tractor Hotline on Ruskin and Zach. All right.
Another